How did we acquire the Louisiana Territory? France and Spain were going back and forth over ownership of the New Orleans port. France was in debt due to the war. Thomas Jefferson wanted to buy New Orleans, but to his surprise, Napoleon offered all of the Louisiana Territory. This purchase doubled the size of the U.S. and cost $15 million, which was a bargain coming in at less than 3 cents an acre. The Louisiana Purchase was approved on April 30th, 1803. The Louisiana Territory included areas that are now states like Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and more.
Explain the debate about whether or not Thomas Jefferson should have made the purchase. Some people argued that this purchase was unconstitutional. Thomas Jefferson believed in a strict interpretation of the Constitution, so this decision was abnormal for him. However, this did help the growth of the U.S. as a new nation, encouraged settlers to move west, and kept expanding.
After purchasing the land, it was time to see what we purchased. The expedition began in St. Louis and started by traveling up the Missouri River. Then they built Fort Mandan, where they stayed the winter of 1804 to 1805. After they crossed the Rocky Mountains, reached the Pacific Ocean using Columbia River. Then they stayed at Fort Clatsop and began their way back to St. Louis.
Sacagawea was a crucial member of the expedition because she helped interpret languages and was familiar with most of the land. By helping to interpret languages such as Hidatsa and Shoshonean, this allowed for trade on the expedition. An example being when Sacagawea was able to obtain the horses from the Shoshone tribe that were needed to cross the Rocky Mountains. Sacagawea was also able to ensure the tribes they encountered that the expedition would not hurt them. She was familiar with the lands, which allowed for Lewis and Clark to become familiar with the new plants and animals. The amazing thing was that she did most of this while she was pregnant.
Explain the role of at least one other explorer that traveled west during this time period, Zebulon Pike. The goal of Pike's expedition was to explore the western and southern parts of the Louisiana Territory. Primarily, it was to discover the source of the Arkansas and Red Rivers while also taking notes on the geography. Because Pike was told to assert the American presence in that area and investigate Spanish presence, he ended up too far south, which caused him to get arrested by Spanish authorities in Mexico.
How were researchers able to track Lewis and Clark's expedition route besides journal entries? Researchers found that the Lewis and Clark expedition carried pills containing mercury that the explorers used to help with issues such as vomiting and sweating. Therefore, since the pills contained mercury and got used significantly, scientists are able to measure the level of mercury in the soil to identify where the expedition camped.
Explain the relationship between this topic and manifest destiny. This was a huge step towards manifest destiny. They believed they needed to go west and explore the new territory they had just bought. They industrialized the West and made it their land. This shows the relationship between the purchase of the Louisiana Territory and manifest destiny.
What happened to Lewis and Clark after the expedition finished? On October 10th in 1809, when Lewis was 35 years old, he shot himself with 2 pistols. This happened 3 years after the expedition ended. Clark continued service for the U.S. government for the next 3 decades and adopted Sacagawea's children. He died in 1838.
Interesting facts. One fact is the U.S. had to borrow money for the Louisiana Purchase. Another fun fact is Thomas Jefferson thought there would be woolly mammoths along the journey. And last but certainly not least, one member died. Only one member died during the expedition.